hear from two amazing women here today on a very special topic about play. Well, actually, not just play, but let me ask a question. How many of you have kids or have kids around your family or your community that you work a lot with? I got two little monkeys at home. They are 4 and 5. They keep life every day real and interesting in the best and brightest of ways. And one of the things that I think as entrepreneurs we often realize but sometimes forget in that strange dichotomous way is that life is never straight and predictable, but our kids always take a time to slow down and play. And they have fun in the moment even when the days are hard and long. And when you think about the marathon that you're on as entrepreneurs, we need you to remember to play too, because that's what's going to keep you to go the distance. And it's also what's really inspiring about how businesses get started sometimes, which is going to be a little bit of the journey that you're going to hear from Joan Barnes today. So at this stage, I want to invite Joan and Madeline to come join me on the stage as I try not to butcher their incredible backgrounds. Please give a warm welcome. Ladies. We say often that the road to career success and happiness starts with having big dreams, like each and every one of you. And today's speaker definitely dreamed of scientific discoveries, working on Broadway and saving the world. All of those big dreams have come true. Madeline Mackey is a published biochemistry researcher. She's worked at 4 Tony Award-winning theaters and responded to disasters all over the country as an officer with the American Red Cross. Just incredible. She's also your sister circle number 61. So Madeline, welcome. Joan Barnes. I just can't even. I had the distinct honor of getting to know Joan when Gymboree, which you probably all know, was once upon a time right across that street. And the very first day that I walked in when I had the honor of being founding executive director, I walked in with a hard hat. And I remember looking across that plaza and going, wow, we're across from Gymboree. Maybe one day I'll have a chance to meet that incredible founder. And now, here we all are in the room with Joan. And, Gymboree has certainly had a lot of moments. I think we might cover some of those today. But she's an incredible author. She is an incredible champion and ally of women entrepreneurs all over the world. She has made the impossible possible for so many of us and has paved a way forward in just the biggest and brightest of ways. My friends, please give a warm welcome to 2 exceptional women today, Joan and Madeline.
Joan, I am so excited about this conversation because you've done it all. You have leveled up, you found balance, you were brave, and you definitely launched a business or 2. So let's take it back. Let's go on a journey. Let's go on Joan's entrepreneur journey. And let's start with, it's 1970s. You're in the great city of San Francisco. You've got 2 children. What made you say, I'm going to start a business?
It's such a pleasure for me to be here. And as I talk to Madeline and we dig down a little bit into my story, I just really invite you to sit in the sidecar, because even though my story may sound different on the outside, that I can relate to that. I'm not a kids, but I don't care about kids' businesses or yoga or whatever we get into. It's really about finding the similarities in the challenges, the inversions, the many successes, the sense of imposter. I can't really do this, nobody knows. All of those, so I'm just going to invite you to just see what feels similar and familiar, or, coming attractions, as I say. So that's what I would like to say. So to your question, Madeline, I was a lonely, isolated mom in the mid-'70s, had my first child in '73, which was the lowest birth year in decades. And I was in California, having come across the country in a Volkswagen bus with the then husband, and braless, and, just a cliche of my generation. And I was lonely and isolated and they were calling people dinks, double income, no kids. So finding your comrades, people who'd made the same choice I had, was near impossible. And lost all the friends because, those of you who have kids or been around people that have kids, it's kind of an all-consuming thing in the early years. So I just wanted, like a lot of entrepreneurs, maybe your stories, this is another entry point for connection, comes from your own need. It's not so much sitting back with your arms crossed, what does the market need, and assessing things like that. It's like, help, SOS. And I wanted friends, so I started a program when I was working as a half-time job at the Jewish Community Center for a big $5,000 a year and a job share called Kinder Gym for my own need, to bring like-minded people who had decided to have kids together. And I'd come from the consciousness-raising groups of the East Coast, and I didn't want it to be a complaining or bitch session type thing. I wanted it to be positive and upbeat, and I figured whatever was troubling all of us at the time would come out naturally. But the environment would be that upbeat. And they bought it. And they put up the money, and, we created some equipment. I didn't know. Another thing about those early years, and maybe some of you can relate to this too, is you don't know what you don't know. I was young and fearless, and I was sure I could figure it out. And so the fact I didn't know a darn thing about any of that didn't matter. So there you go. That's the genesis. And it went very well. It started making money for all the programs that didn't make money at the Jewish Community Center. I opened a second one for them, and it did the same thing. So I was starting to feel a little bit of confidence.
And so you're confident, you have a program that works, you have a job, you're successful, and then Max Shapiro, the president of the JCC, comes to you. He's a savvy entrepreneur and says, Joan, I think this could be a business. Let's take it out of the JCC and make it a business. What made you go, bring it on, rather than, I'm good, no, we're fine. Why should we step into these entrepreneur waters?
I bet there's not anybody in any of these chairs that couldn't answer the question the same way I'm going to answer it. You're just doing it. It's why not? You see out there the vision. You're going to follow the breadcrumbs to get there however it goes. You don't know exactly. And he was willing to put up the money. He seemed like a big grown-up. He was probably 4 years older than me, And he'd had these Rick Barry, who's a big famous basketball guy, camps and then he had sold it and he had a non-compete clause. So he was looking for something else to do. And so he put up the money and I was doing all the work. So P.S., just a few years later when I realized this is not a cool equation, I bought him out. I doubled his money. I took a mortgage on the house without telling my then husband because I was afraid he'd say, that's ridiculous, we can't afford that, and bought him out. So that's the end of Max Shapiro. But he got me going.
So you got going. You took it out of JCC,
Yep.
became your own business, and then how did you get business? How did you market that business? How did you let people know that you were here? How did you plant your flag and say, come to Jamboree?
Well, I'm sure nobody in the audience, I'm looking around, is old enough to remember when there really was no social media, and the only way you marketed things. Okay, maybe, how many of you remember? Okay.
Miss
all
those
right.
days.
My apologies. In those days, it was either paid advertising or free publicity. And free publicity was like an endorsement. It was like that magazine, that newspaper said, do this. It didn't have the competition of all the social media, so that it was either you paid for it or you were lucky enough to get a story about yourself in some magazine or newspaper. And we were really on the cusp of something new. We were like preschool. Well, we were to preschool what preschool was to kindergarten. In the 50s, kindergarten was the first place you started going to school. And then in the 60s and 70s, everybody went to preschool, and it was very rare that you'd get a kid in kindergarten that never had a preschool experience. And we were the first thing that you did with your kid before you went to preschool. And that got a lot of attention. So we were able to get a big full-page feature in whatever town we were going to open at, and then women came running to us and said, I want a business like this. And they would open the next one in the town. And so we were able to start developing just by word of mouth the business itself, and the people just kept running because it was like they weren't that different from me. Lonely, isolated, wanting companionship, wanting to meet other people who had made that choice. So, it was just, it was a business ready to ripen.
You were in the right place.
At the right time.
At the right time.
And as my first venture capitalist said, it is so much about timing, being on the right street corner at the right time, when the right bus goes by. But the difference is you got to know which bus to get on.
So you got on the bus.
I did.
You had immediate success. Did you ever feel like an imposter?
Do I ever not feel like an imposter? Now I'm, 45 years plus from that time, and I still feel like what am I doing sitting up here? Why are these young faces looking at me, wanting to know how I took this concept that eventually went to a public company, and Bain took it off the public market for $2 billion. How did that happen? I want to be like you when I grow up. And I think, wait, hold on. Wait till you hear the rest of the story. You're going to change your mind, seriously. Yeah, in the beginning, I had my arms around the business. I was opening one after another. I still didn't leave my $5,000 a year job because I didn't know whether it would really make it. So somewhere along this location 6 to 8, I thought I had a business, so I left. And then it started franchising, and people would come to me and saying, I want to start one of these somewhere else outside the Bay Area, because it was manageable from Marin County, Sonoma County, down through the nascent Silicon Valley. But when people wanted to go to LA to start one of these, now I had to really think, how am I going to do that? Because I couldn't go with the franchisee and help them find their location or interview the teachers with them. It was getting to be a bit of a business now. It wasn't just a hobby that was sort of growing by itself. And that's, a new stage.
And with that new stage came new hurdles.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the very first scariest hurdle for any business owner is you had the business, it was out there, and the U.S. Patent Office called.
Right.
And said, we have a problem.
Right.
Can you share with the audience
Right.
what happened and how you handled that first major hurdle in the
And
business?
looking back, the history of all the hurdles, so to speak, and challenges, this seems like the easiest one of all, even though at the time I was sure the business was going to implode. We had at that time maybe 8 company-owned, so called them, locations, and maybe 6 to 10 franchises. So I'd sold franchises, people had bought them, they put up business signs, they were operating, and we had a little thing going on. And all of a sudden, the name was Kinder Gym, and the patent office said, too generic, you have to change your name. Change our name. We had 8 years of business under that name.
8 years?
Yeah. Well, the company-owned ones, yes, had been going for. You can't really franchise until you've got something proven. So we had, I don't remember. I'm not remembering exact years, but it was at least 5 years of that.
Mm-hmm.
And these franchisees have been going for a few years. And so, luckily we had something in the contract that said if any of this kind of thing happened, the franchise agreement, the franchisees would have to go along with it. But just the devastation, and then what would the name be, and how would we, blah, blah, blah. So 1,000 little names on the kitchen table over the next several weeks until one day I get a call from my then husband as he's jogging along the Embarcadero on one of the payphones, and he's going, breathlessly, Jamboree. And I thought, that's it. And we did mall intercepts, and we said to parents holding up the name, what does this mean to you? And they go, I don't really know, but it's got something to do with kids, and it's really playful, and it sounds fun, and it just had all the right resonance. So we went for it. So down went the Kinder Gym signs, up went the Jamboree signs. Seamless from then on. It was just a big fear.
But you overcame it.
And we overcame it. And I think that's the lesson of it's an internal fear. It's probably not going to be as hard to execute on it as we think.
Yeah. The shortest distance between a problem is the solution. All right, so you mentioned already to everyone, you talk about you started franchising the business. what made you decide to go in that direction? And if you had to do it all over again, would you pick franchise as the way to grow your business?
Great questions. Is anybody out here thinking about franchising someday? Their concept? Okay, couple. Well, actually, to be perfectly honest, I didn't even know what a franchise was. Because at that time, got a really bad rap. People were selling earthworm farms at airports and all kinds of things. Seriously, and people were getting ripped off. Nothing was regulated. So it was like, people came to me and said, can I buy a franchise? I thought, well, McDonald's is a franchise, right? So, and there was no Google, so I just had to sort of act like, tell me about a franchise to people that seemed a little more sophisticated. So I learned what they were, and I thought, well, you want to buy a franchise? Sure. So it also, I wasn't quite that glib, but I realized that people who were saying that kind of knew that they wanted their own business, but they wanted the support of somebody who'd been there before, who could guide them, who could hold their hand, sort of like a good parent-child relationship, not a teenager one, where the child is really very much looking for you for support and every other thing that children need. So I categorically could say from the rear view mirror, I would absolutely do it that way. Because I got these incredible women who came from a number of different fields who were not much younger than me, 3, 4, 5 years, if that. But they wanted their own business. They wanted to be able to combine their family focus with running a business. And we offered that unique thing. And we were getting the savviness of their husband, who was the primary bread earner, but was a closet entrepreneur. So we had them. We were going in business with them too, and because they wished to God they could be an entrepreneur, but they were responsible for the income into the household. So I loved franchising. I absolutely loved it, and we had just enough men working in the home company and that we kept the equal opportunities people away. Because we were, before inclusion and all of that, we were just all women. It was so much. I just love working with women. We were able to, take a little detour to talk about something personal and get right back on it. You do that with a guy? No, I got to finish what I'm doing. Don't take me off my track, And women are just so able to multitask and be able to they have no ego about, sure, I'll make the coffee, I'll collate the stuff, and I'll do the marketing, and I'll do the finance, all of that. We're wonderful.
How did that impact the culture? Having a dominant female workforce, how did that impact the culture, the values of the organization?
I wish I had a good answer for that, but since I didn't know what the opposite would be, that's all I knew. All I can say is it was glorious, because I have subsequently believe in my consulting to many women, is that, we, and just our basic nature is that we are about collaboration and agreement. We're not mostly trying to one-up somebody or get the power. We're not happy unless everybody's on board. So there's good listening skills that are really primary, and so I didn't have enough experience working with men to know that there is another way that men typically can operate. So that's what I can say about that.
So then you have this business, you have some franchises, you're mostly based here on the West Coast.
Actually, that when I realized when I had people coming to me and saying, are we echoing here?
No, you're fine.
Okay. I'm wanting to start them outside the area, and I realized I'm going to need something more than what I have to offer. So I went and met a very seasoned guy, a venture capitalist, and I told him what we were doing, and we instantly had good connection. And he said, go home, write a business plan. I like you. I like your business. If it makes sense, I'm in. I'll back you up. I'll back you. So I had an old friend that I'd gone to high school with who was head of the Stanford Business School Alumni Association. He helped me write the business plan, and a few months later, we were funded with seed money to do a national expansion of the Gymboree franchise thing. And I was savvy enough to know not to be branded some sort of crazy California phenomenon, we took a big ride over to the East Coast and planted ourselves in the East Coast to get a toehold in the East Coast media. Again, this is all pre-social media, and so to be able to be written up in the Wall Street Journal and U.S. News and Report and Newsweek and the New York Times and all the incredible press we had, and People magazine really made us legit. So within a few years, we had a couple hundred franchises.
A couple hundred franchises.
Couple hundred franchises.
So bringing in a venture capitalist, now you have some people to answer to.
Definitely.
Right?
It's a different rodeo.
Right, exactly. How did that change the business? How did that change your dynamic as the CEO? Because now you're playing in the big leagues.
Yes. And the seed money was quick because, of course, we went through that in no time. And basically, as a CEO with venture capitalists, you're in the storytelling business because you write a business plan, and as soon as you write it, it's outdated. You don't make it. And so you have to tell another story of why the next business plan you will make. You know what I mean? So I learned that they have a different timeline for you. So when you put together your business plan, the very bottom thing on the financial statement 5 years out better have a certain kind of EBITDA, because that's what they're looking to do. They're looking to eventually exit from the business, either whether you get bought by a bigger company, or in those days, if you could get to a certain gross figure, you could go public, you know. So I understood all that, but it was fiction. I was writing fiction. I don't know how we're going to get there, but let's try this route. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And the venture capitalists back in those days were also seasoned business people. You know, they'd started their own businesses. They weren't these, you know, wet behind the ears 27-year-olds just out of Harvard Business School who never had any experience, who are, you know, kind of arrogant and have a different pace for you. These guys, and they don't want you as the CEO of the business. They don't want to run your business. They don't want to take it away and give it to someone else. They like people like us who are determined, dogged, give your life for this business. You know what I mean? They just want to kick you, dust you off and put you back in the playing field. So that's what I learned. As much as I felt disappointed that we didn't hit the numbers, and you know they would still give us a couple more $1 million to keep rolling. They essentially believed, and I guess they had enough experience to know it's never a straight line. It's always a lot of detours.
Can you relate? Entrepreneurship, is it a straight line? Not even close. There's no line at all.
And not only is it detours that are upwardly mobile, you know, that kind of thing, or there's a lot of inversions too. It's like crash.
Up
and pick
and
your
down.
But I mean, you're even down. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it up from here.
Wow. And as I was reading your book, Joan, one of the things that keeps popping up as a theme for you is growth. You kept growing. You never said, oh, this is enough, I'm happy, I'm content. Because now you're funded, you've got seed money, you are franchising all over the country, headed out to all over the world. And then you say, oh, let's go in a whole other direction and go into the retail space.
Well, that's not as pretty of a. That's a very nice way to frame it, but I'm going to give you the real frame. The franchising business was never going to give the investors the return on their money that they had wanted. The businesses, the actual play centers, which were the franchises, were wonderful for the people going. They loved it. And even the franchisee could make a little money, but we as the company, we were never going to make any money. We could go along and be a nice little family business and pay our employees, but they didn't put several $1 million in this to fund a family business. So the revenue that we were going to get as a percentage of the franchise income and what we needed to do to make the franchise successful was never going to add up. And we could give them less services, but the way we sold new franchises is the potential franchisee didn't call us. They called other franchisees to say, what's this company like? Do they support you? Do they give you the tools you need? And so we, not that we wouldn't have done that anyway, because that's just what I wanted, but it was just more expensive. So I had to let the investors and the board and so forth know that we weren't going to be able to deliver on this strategy. We could deliver franchises, but now we were starting to go international, but we were never going to be able to return. And so they said, all right, go back to the drawing board and figure out something else to do. But
Because they want to get paid.
Yeah, but we're not giving you any more money to do it. So, compared to the change of the name, now we're talking hurdles. Now we're talking challenges. Mm-hmm. What kind of a new strategy where we don't need money can we possibly get together where we could, be sure that one would be profitable? So we did licensing. You know what a licensing? Who doesn't? Anyone not know what licensing is? All right, so so we had the brand, and Gymboree was getting quite well known within the market of parents, and we did market testing, and 70% of people who had kids in the age group of 0 to 5 knew what it was, even if it wasn't in their city, because of all the press we'd gotten. So we went and we were able to secure some pretty fancy licenses. Random House did our books. Hasbro was a big toy company. They did our toy line, blah, blah, blah. We had, I don't know, there's probably some defunct, I probably can't even remember the name of it now, that did our clothes, health techs. So these were some brands, some formidable brands at the time, but if you aren't Snoopy or Garfield or Little Mermaid or whoever the cool guy is now, and you don't, knock it out of the ballpark, they're going to drop you. And guess who got dropped? Gymboree.
Wow.
So now I go back to the board and say, we just, this is not going to be the strategy that saves us. So, it was a near-death experience. So if we just said, Uncle, and at that time, all I had was the original money that I'd bought Max Shapiro out with, $6,000 of my own money, and there'd been millions of other people's money. So it wasn't about, I have to do this to save my family. It was, and maybe you relate to this is one of the things I'm sure you relate to, is I wasn't going to let this business fail. Mm-hmm. 25 years of therapy, I still haven't figured out why. I would let my marriage go down I would let my kids, I don't even know their school teachers' names, you know what I mean? I never went to but that goddamn business was going to not go down on my watch.
Damn right.
That is what we call an entrepreneur.
Yes.
I'm not particularly proud of it, but I'm really aware of it. And that same guy that wrote the business plan, who was the, headed up the graduates of Stanford Business School, asked me when I was kind of a pup, I was early 30s, to come and speak to the graduating class. To his Stanford MBA school. And I remember standing up there at the podium, literally couldn't control myself from laughing. I could never have gotten into Stanford Business School, never in a million years. And if I had, somehow somebody got me in there and I was sitting in those chairs, I would have failed every class. So here I am telling them, how to build a business, But at this time, this was pre-entrepreneurial chairs where they didn't even have, study of entrepreneurship in business schools. Mm-hmm. And actually, I had to say, I don't know what I can teach you. Because I don't think entrepreneurs necessarily have the skills. They have a sort of an internal compass. Yeah. Sort of like Oprah says, she follows her internal GPS.
Instinct.
Yeah, an instinct. And we just, throw out the breadcrumbs and just sort of go from point A to point B to point C. And I don't know that sort of inability to allow failure. Because what I can say I do is that I had a real talent in hiring extraordinary people. I did not need to be know how to do everything. In fact, I knew how to do nothing. I just knew how to cheerlead and get people, hire good people and let them roll. And go to their office. Write that down.
Hire good people and let them roll.
Because their successes and their capacity is what's going to make you and the brand shine. And I would say to everybody, we're building a brand here, not personal legacies. This company's got to be able to roll without any of us, including me, or mostly including me. It's not about any of us. And when you hire great people and they know what they're doing and you just hands off, and just go in and say, tell me what you're doing in there, you know, or how are we accomplishing what, I mean, I wasn't that ignorant to what was happening, but I didn't have the skills to do anything in any of those offices, yet they didn't have the talent to do what I did, which is to have this indomitable courage and dogged, you know, capacity to keep rolling. So that's how I sort of see that. But I'm not answering your question.
No, you're good. That's where we were going. You're a phenomenal woman.
Thank you.
You were under a lot of pressure. You had a lot of demands on your time and your energy. You were a CEO. You were a mother. You were a wife. How did you handle some of those pressures? And I know some of the ways you talk about in the book are not the most healthiest ways.
No. I developed a pretty serious eating disorder. And I also built, I was a bit of, as part of the eating disorder, I was an exercise addict. None of these things I really learned until I finally, some years later, went to a treatment center and found out that my exercise, you know, what was I getting a lot of accolades for, was actually an addiction. You know, it was a way to get rid of the calories that I was eating, a way to calm my crazy brain and things like that. So I built an aerobic studio in the Gymboree offices, and my favorite part of my job was to go around and make everybody come at lunchtime. And I make my own playlist. It was like, you know, jazzercise on steroids. And I made it really hard because I needed it to be really hard for me. And these people are panting. They just wanted to be they wanted to be in their office with their sandwich, working. No, you're coming to class because I'm the CEO, right? My favorite thing. And then afterwards was popcorn time. So we had popcorn artists, and that was my way of being an eat. You know, I didn't go home and buy bags of groceries and pull down the curtains. I just was like this all day long. It was the way I calmed my tension. But I didn't get that any of this was really not good, even though I got up in the early morning before the kids got up and hiked up to the top of the mountain and went to an aerobics class and got home in time to, you know, because I needed all of that to settle myself down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I've spoke for many women's conferences over the years and self-disclosed about how my eating disorder just took me over eventually. And so many women would come up to me and say, I have an eating disorder. I've never told anybody. It's, you know, it's sort of women's alcoholism. So it's, you know, it was that. But I wanted to say, I still lived with it for many years. It was insidious and just got worse and worse. So no, I did not have balance.
Yeah.
I will be the first to admit that, as I've said a couple of times here already today, the business was my love affair in every way. And I was the business. I didn't understand if Gymboree went down, oh, that went down, what would I do next? I would be dead because I was so connected. I was the Gymboree lady to me. Mm-hmm. I was that. And if that business failed, I would just might as well end my life. Just some way I didn't know how I would carry on. So when the licensing didn't happen, I thought, well, we got to carry on. So I found a buyer. So during the licensing, Hasbro, who'd done the thing, we got kind of friendly. So I approached them about whether or not they would like to, consider a corporate investment or something or other. And I flew on the private jet to Stephen Hasenfeld's at Rhode Island. P.S., they decided they were going to buy the company. And so I thought, okay, I'll report to some corporate vice president. He'll find out I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I'll get fired, but at least the company will carry on. And that's all I really cared about. So that's what was going to happen. I don't know how many thousands of dollars later, in months of negotiations and contracts, we had a deal. So I was in New York to sign the deal. On the plane was a board member, the lawyer, the whole thing, and we were going to have a big celebration, and Gymboree was going to get sold. And I breathed a sigh of relief until that afternoon, I get a phone call from Hasbro from some corporate vice president lady I'd never heard of, saying the deal's off. We're not coming to sign. We've changed our mind. I can feel the whole thing right now.
Yeah.
I was completely devastated. I was sure that I was just going to die right there, then and there on the bed. And so what I did to save myself from that moment was just act as if it didn't happen. I still do that sometimes when things are too much for me. I can't deal with it at that moment, so I pretended it didn't happen. And I called the office and asked to speak to this one and that one. How are we doing on this? How are we doing on that? And then I realized that this has happened. And in an hour, these people are going to be here expecting to have a pre-ceremonial dinner together and blah, blah, blah. And I am having a shame attack. Like nobody's business. How will I tell them? What will they, how do I tell them we'll go on from here? I'm plumb out of ideas. And I don't even remember most of that because I was traumatized. They came, one of them was a woman, so that was nice. And then the next day I got on a plane going back. It's all a big blur. I do remember going into the office and I'd called a few people and said, the deal didn't go down, acting strong. And then I said to the management team, I don't have any more ideas, but I know this company's not going to go down. And I'm going to go away so I'm not a drag. And I have the confidence that you guys are going to come up with our next strategy. And I need you to give up your weekend and get together and figure it out. And I'll be back on Monday to see what we're doing. Talk about believing in your team.
Yeah.
And I had a little cabin up in the Sierra, which was like kind of my heart place, and grabbed the family, as I remember, and just went up there and sat by the river, hoping beyond hope. And my CFO came up and said, we're going to be out of money in about 2 weeks. So I hope the rest of the team back home figures it out. So we decided who was going to get cut, who was going to stay in the life raft. And not only Monday morning when I got back, was I looking to see what we were going to maybe do. I was going to have to chop heads so that we might get a month more instead of 2 weeks more, and who was going and who was going to stay strapped in. Not fun. So, this one comes into the office, bye-bye. This one, bye-bye. And then after all that, the core team comes in with a picture of a play center next to a retail store and said, we're going to go into the clothing business. We're going to design and manufacture our own apparel on the basis of gymboree, and we're going to do that. I thought, absolutely we're going to do that. We've got no retail experience, no manufacturing experience, but of course that's going to be our next thing. And why wouldn't the venture capitalists? We failed at the franchise business. We couldn't get the licensing together. The buyers just backed out. Let's go. Let's roll. But this was all we had to do. Yes, we put together a plan. I had some, we drew up some architectural plans. I sort of like the advertising agent. We just went for broke. We're going to get this deal. We're going to get this client. The client meaning the venture capitalists. The president of Macy's had just joined the VC world, and he came in and asked to listen. So, we're doing our presentation. I'm doing my thing. And by this time I'm really good at this stuff because I'm always telling a new story. I got the fiction down. And the guy says right afterwards, he said, may I say something? The president of Macy's, and he says, you guys would be crazy to make this investment. Just like I said before, there's not a retail on the team. They don't know how to run the business they have, on and on. And then the board members all look at me like, and what do you say to that? And I said, I don't believe that that's important. I think we've got the talent here to do a pilot store, and based on the success of that store, you can decide whether or not we're worth going more to. But I think we're worth an investment in one store, and we'll get ourselves over to Hong Kong and get the line made. I'll come back and I'll find a store. I mean, I just, I had this naive confidence, this craziness. Looking back, it was like, what was I smoking? And sure enough, the lead investor called me and he said, they said, at the meeting end, he said, we're going to think about it and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, I had no idea. He called me the next day and he says, I believe in you, Joan. We're going to give you whatever the investment was, I don't remember, bridge funding investment. And if it goes, it will convert it into an investment, blah, blah. If it doesn't, who knows? Get over to Hong Kong, design your line, and when you get back, go find a store. So we get to Hong Kong, we go to all these, one of the people's husbands, a big shot with the Gap, so we get to meet the guy who does all the things for the Gap. After being there a week, we can't find a factory that'll do a dozen pinks and a dozen whites, and we're too small. So I called the investor thinking, okay, this is definitely it. We're done now, and said, they won't produce that small amount. He said that we'll open 2 stores. So we got the line produced. I came back. This was in May. I found 2 stores, negotiated those leases, and we were open by holiday of the same year. Mm-hmm. That year, we were the top seller per square foot. We won awards for the best design store. We looked like a basketball court with bleachers, shelving. It was just we'd just gone from being flattened to now now everybody was on fire because they're like penguins. They follow success. Now we get money from Harvard Endowment Fund, Chemical Bank of New York, Norwest Venture Capital, $6-7 million comes flooding in for a national rollout of the retail store. So now but it's not a straight shot by any means. And meanwhile, my eating disorder is mounting. Now we have to get real people in there that know what they're doing because now we're in a whole new business. And of course, the franchisees are scared shitless that we're going to ignore them because now we got this new business. And they're not idiots, and they know that this is going to take a lot of our time. So I have to get them on board that we'll never abandon our core business. And it's going to be good for everybody because it's all going to be called Gymboree. Mm-hmm. And people who come to the store will be sent to the play centers and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be a cross-pollination of company-owned retail stores and franchise place programs. And not only did I sell that idea, it worked. It actually worked for some time. But, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not a business runner. Once we got to, probably 7 stores, I was done. It was all about creating the vision, but, now getting the warehouse operating well and making sure that this was not my strength. But, and now all my original team had to go. And I was having nightmares of, dead cats beheaded on the back, I was over my head. But the board, because the press still loved me and thought, oh no, you're going to be you're going to be a Phil Knight like from Nike. You're going to take it from inception to public company. And I thought, I am not. And now the eating disorder got out of hand. I'm completely crazy. And then pretty soon the fall. Yeah. Pretty soon I can't do this anymore. So I go away to a treatment center, flattened, and my investor is, there's a lot of shame because he thinks he's not going to tell on me. He's just saying it's a personal matter, even though I was totally unvarnished about being able to say what's the truth because I just wanted acceptance for what was going on. And I thought I was going away for 3 months, and I stayed away for 3 years. And at that time, I'd said to the investor I wanted to sell my stock because I thought I could see my marriage was not going to make it through this time, and I wanted some security. And he kept saying, I don't ever want you to think I've taken advantage of you because I believe in this company. I think it's going public. So you think about it, and I will buy, but you think about, holding on to as much as you can, blah, blah, blah. So I called him from the treatment center. I said, I want to go through with this. And he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Joan. You've given your life to this company. If this company goes public within 18 months, I'm going to rip this paper up. And you're going to get everything you're going to get. I didn't ask for this. He just offered this. The company went public in 22 months. So it went public. I sold most of my percentage. I still did fine. I never went into this thing for money anyway. But, had it gone public 4 months earlier, I would have been one of those kind you read about in the paper, made a lot of money. And I never cared. I was just so thrilled to know somebody who was that principled that they would do that. So that's the story of Gymboree.
Yeah, it's an amazing story.
Or my involvement in Gymboree. It continued for many years thereafter. We were in 40 countries, and countries you would never expect. Saudi Arabia, Vietnam, where women aren't even allowed to own businesses or sit on the floor. They were doing Gymboree classes, and then we had up to 1,200 stores. And then during COVID, the play programs were sold to a Chinese company, so they still go mainly in Europe and in Asia. The stateside ones are dropping by the dozens, and the retail programs, the retail stores, all 1,200 of them, shuttered during COVID, and the URL, Gymboree.com, got sold to Children's Place for $80 million, just the name.
Wow.
So it's got a new iteration. We done? Okay.
I got it. Okay. So I'm going to call you the comeback kid, Joan.
Okay.
So Gymboree's over for you.
For me.
For you, we sunset that business, we heal,
Yep.
and then she decides, I'm going to jump back into entrepreneurship and do another business. Talk about you got into yoga studio and then your nonprofit.
Right. Well, first of all, as I was getting healing from my eating disorder and being in Florida at a long-term treatment center where I met my best friend who's with me here in the back. She was my sponsor and has been with me on the whole journey, and I with her on hers. And it's just a major time of my life. When I got back to California, finally, after all these years, I started a nonprofit called Begin From Within, which is for women with food, weight, and body image issues. And, it was never to make any money. It was just to give women a place to go and talk about that. So that was great. Then I found yoga for my own next stage of healing. I got taken to a yoga class, and I burst out crying in that class. Just the physical movement, the ancient practice, it all resonated for me. So, after becoming, and then the then owner of that yoga studio saw the thing about Begin From Within and called me, just out of the blue and said, if you ever want to do some programs at my studio, I'd love to offer the space. And I said, you don't know, but I'm a customer of yours. So fast forward, we meet. She's got her own personal problems. I buy into the business, and shortly thereafter, I buy out the business. And I'm thinking, I'm going to be like a little Gymboree franchisee. I'm going to have this one little, yoga studio, and it's going to be all manageable. And then people come to me and say, oh, you're the Gymboree lady. We should build a chain, and instead of venture capital, we'll all put up, money, and and I'm thinking, I'm an entrepreneur. And I thought, okay, we'll do a Bay Area thing. Can't do another national rollout. So we start to do that. I had one in San Francisco, a couple in Marin County, and I started to feel that same stuff come back. I'm still the same person. I have no balance. I can't think about anything else. I just want the business to succeed. My friends, everybody's going to the back of the bus. And I thought, I don't want this life.
Okay.
I can't do this anymore. So I sold it to YogaWorks, which was a national chain, and they bought it. And I consulted to them for a while, and my business became YogaWorks. And then YogaWorks, 10 years later, shuttered over COVID too. So, good ride.
Good ride. So, one last question
Please.
for you. Advice for our women entrepreneurs here. As a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, how do you preserve during tough times? How do you move your business forward? How do you keep going?
As you heard from my story, I don't have those answers. Regrettably, don't come to this one for that source. I have lost the privilege of being an entrepreneur. I know that. I can't do it because I don't know how to find that balance. I don't know how to do any of that. I just know how to persevere. And to some extent, that's wonderful, if you're willing to not have anything else in your life, of importance. So I satisfy my own entrepreneurial desires by working with many of you, and helping you. But I can't say, I think that all of us have to know ourselves deeply. And there's nothing more formidable than learning about yourself through an entrepreneurial journey.
Yay.
You're going to find out who you are. I wish I had advice, and I'm not into advice anyway, because I think we learn best by doing ourselves and seeing, oh, this is not working. With a lot of consciousness, mindfulness, acceptance, and then real concern about what choices we're going to make once we know all that.
Joan Barnes, everyone.
Thank you.